What comes to your mind when you hear Florida wildlife? Alligators, herons, osprey? I'm here to tell you that there is so much more. There's a reason this has become one of my favorite states to visit for wildlife photography, and today I'm going to show you why. I'm going to take you through some of my favorite ecosystems that I visit while I'm out here looking for wildlife and show you many of the species that you can expect to find and photograph while you're out here. So if you've never considered visiting Florida for wildlife photography before, hopefully by the end of this video, I'll have changed your mind. Let's start in one of my favorite habitats to visit, Florida's swamps. Florida's swamps are such fun ecosystems to explore and look for wildlife in. But just like any habitat, there are some things you'll want to consider when looking for wildlife. Possibly the most important factor being the time of year. Swamps are usually thought of as these boggy, mosquito-infested wetlands, and for good reason. During the wet season, they are just that. If you visit the swamp during the wet season, be prepared with your layered clothing and mosquito hats to keep the bugs at bay. The increase in water will flood otherwise dry areas, and wildlife can be much more difficult to find as they're more spread out or taking cover from the weather. When visiting Florida's swamps for wildlife photography, I always do so during the dry season. The land completely transforms and these swamps look more like a traditional forest. Wildlife congregate in and around the remaining water sources and become much easier to find and photograph. What may seem like a quiet woodland is in reality a habitat just teeming with a variety of species. Each time I visit this ecosystem, I'm blown away with how much wildlife I'm able to find. Birds, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians can be found in abundance. Some of my favorite species to find out here include alligators, opossums, owls, and raccoons. But these are only a few of the many faces you might see in your time visiting Florida's swamps. It's easy to see why I love Florida's swamps so much for wildlife photography. Let's hop to our next area and see a whole different cast of characters. If you're on vacation in Florida, you can't visit without going to the beach. This is an incredible habitat filled with a large diversity of wildlife. These animals are generally very used to people and, as such, make them very easy to photograph. Each time I vacation in Florida with my family, I know that we'll be spending an ample amount of time at the beach, so I'm sure to bring my camera along for the adventure. Even when I'm not specifically visiting for wildlife photography, it's easy to fill memory cards with great images of a variety of birds in flight, and I find the crabs and other small critters to be just as fun. Just like wildlife photography in most other places, the best times to visit will be early morning and late afternoons and evenings. This is great as there are fewer people around, which makes it much easier to photograph the animals without getting people in your backgrounds. If you want to retreat to the water, hop in with your snorkel and a GoPro for a new view and plenty of fish all around. So, if you're simply visiting on vacation, or if you're short on time and want to see a great variety of easily photographable animals, the beaches are the place to go. Join me on an incredible African safari in Kenya's breathtaking Masai Mara. This is an area of the world that has led to some of my most memorable wildlife experiences, and I'd love to share it with you. Our extremely experienced and knowledgeable guides get us in the best positions for outstanding photos, and each day we'll return to all the luxuries of home in our comfortable safari camp. You won't want to miss this one. Hit the link below for more details. All right, let's get back to it. I'm here at one of my favorite wildlife reserves in Florida, and this brings me to the next type of area that I love searching when looking for wildlife to photograph: reserves and state parks. Florida is filled with countless wildlife reserves, state and national parks. These areas cover a wide variety of habitats, and most, if not all, of Florida's wild species can be found across the multitude of parks and reserves. I've spent weeks exploring these various areas and have just barely started to scratch the surface. Much like the wildlife we covered while visiting the beaches, the animals here are generally very used to people and very comfortable being photographed. I'd say about half or even more of my wildlife images from Florida were taken while visiting a wildlife reserve, state, or national park. I photographed everything from barred owls and armadillos to tortoises, alligators, and countless species of birds in these wildlife-rich areas. Collectively, there are hundreds of these areas, and many of the reserves and state parks are so close together that you can visit many of them in a short period of time and decide which ones are your favorites. While visiting these areas, please remember that there are likely distance restrictions in place for your own good and for that of the wildlife you're photographing. Even so, I've gotten some incredible images in these areas of a huge variety of animals. The next habitat that I'm going to show you is the reason I started visiting Florida for wildlife photography in the first place. Let's head into the wetlands and mangroves. If you've never visited Florida's wetlands or kayaked through a maze of mangroves, you're definitely in for a treat when you give it a try. One of my favorite wildlife photography adventures that I've ever done was camping in the mangroves, setting out day after day in the kayak, and photographing a wide variety of birds that inhabit these areas. Much like visiting the swamps, if you're able to visit during the dry season, the mosquitoes won't be quite as bad and you'll have a more enjoyable time. These ecosystems are filled with countless species of birds, and it seems that there's something new to photograph around each bend. Ibises, egrets, and about every species of heron are regulars to these areas. I love photographing them, but my absolute favorites are the roseate spoonbills. These birds with their magnificent pinks always steal the show when you spot them. Among the mangroves, it's not just birds that you'll see, but lizards, crustaceans, and even the occasional dolphin may pay you a visit. The wetlands are filled with birds, small, medium-sized mammals, and alligators hidden in the depths. Some of these areas take a bit more effort to explore, but I found that it's always worth it. I'm always amazed at just how much wildlife can be found out here. Even driving through a neighborhood may result in encounters with ibises, osprey, or an owl. You just never know what you'll find out here. I hope you can see why this is such a special part of the world for wildlife photography. I've got some fun Florida adventures I think you'll enjoy right here. So go check them out and get your trip planned out here soon. Thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate the support. I'll see you next time.